The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang is a fantasy novel recommended mainly by Daniel Green. I didn't really know much about this book, to be honest. It's a self-published novel, and since I read about 95% of my books from the public library, it's not, self-published books aren't really something that's accessible to me unless you get a Kindle or an Audible, I guess, and pay for it, but I don't like paying for things. So The Sword of Kaigen is a Japanese-inspired fantasy story. It takes place in Takayubi. It is a small fishing village on the coast of the Kaigenese country, Kaigenese Empire. And the families that live there are part of the Sword of Kaigen, which are the first line of defense against the vicious Kaigenese forces, which is another country across the ocean. And the Sword of Kaigen is basically anachronistic in the sense that they are very traditional to the point of being faulty at times. They wear kimonos and handbox and things like that. They use katanas, even though guns exist in this world. And our main character is Misaki Matsuda. She is a young housewife in her early 30s who has 4 young boys, a very stern, powerful husband, and also brother-in-law, loving sister-in-law as well, and other friends. It's a very small, tight-knit community where everyone's very traditional. The second character that we also focus on is Mamuru. He is the eldest, 14 years old. He is also very powerful in the sense that their bloodlines are very unique to give them abilities. In this book, it's very similar to the magic system of Avatar: The Last Airbender. There are wind users, there are fire users, and water users, and light users, I think. Those 4, light instead of earth. And the way they use the powers in this book with combat is a lot darker than Avatar: The Last Airbender. In fact, the world building itself is very similar to Legend of Korra. So if I were to describe this book, it would be Legend of Korra's setting, Avatar: The Last Airbender's magic system and character development, throw in an Akira Kurosawa film, and there you have it, which is a really interesting mix. For me, the book is really long, but it's really investing because the book is really focused on character development. There are 2 sides to the story. There's the sort of inner conflict of Mitsuki as she's trying to raise these young boys, do right by them with the incoming war. Also the traditional values of her husband, because she has all this mysterious stuff going on in her past. She used to be like a vigilante of sorts, and she's well traveled. She knows more about the world than she lets on, but in the face of her very traditional parents and her parents-in-law and her husband, she keeps quiet, and she's sort of emotionally detached, and it's not right for her, and it's slowly not killing her, but it's slowly sucking the life out of her until war shows up on their doorstep. And there's also Mamuru, who also has a lot of burden on his shoulders because every family has their own unique sort of special ability thing. So theirs is the Whispering Blade, in which you turn ice into a sword, and that sword is so strong that it can cut through steel because you're controlling the molecules to themselves. So the Whispering Blade is sort of their family heritage technique, and Mamuru has not learned it. Sometimes generations don't learn it, so he's got a lot of pressure because he's basically only 14 years old, but he's forced to be this warrior at such a young age. And they really go into the whole traditionalism, how it's a bad thing, because there are a lot of aspects explored in this book that are really great. The sort of hypocrisy of everything. For example, when Mamuru was 3, he started exhibiting power over water, which is great because that means he's a prodigy. Most children his age don't develop their powers till age 6. So instead of having the father teach him, the father was like, I'm not going to teach a child. That's beneath me. He'll wait till he's 6. So Mitsuki ended up having to teach him how to control his water powers at age 3 instead. It's something you'd think it'd be productive to not train your prodigy children early, but it's something that the sternness of the society, the way they live in this little village, is very backwards in the sense that they don't care about other things, and it's very different from all the cultures around the country. There are other cultures where the women join the army and they're considered equal partners, but not in this little fishing village. Anyways, this book is self-published, so it's a little bit different from other books in the sense that the climax happens about here in the middle, and there's a large chunk of stuff going on, and the second half of the book is mostly a denouement of sorts. It's a more character-driven sort of aftermath story after the big action part in the middle. So some people might not be into that. I didn't care because I was really invested in the characters. I really enjoyed this book. It's violent, it's intimate, it's very emotional, it's really good handling on the character development. I wasn't sure if the author was a man or a woman, but after I found out it was a woman, that explains why, you know, Mitsuki's such like a interesting mother character, and, you know, the mindset she had and all the depression and things she had while, you know, going into this sort of arranged marriage of sorts. For cons, there are a few in there. The main one being that sometimes the dialogue can get a little on the nose. It's really subtle in other places, but sometimes it can be really clunky, especially near the end. And also there's a little bit of sequel baiting. Not sequel baiting in the sense that, you know, it's like a quick mention of something. There's like this long part at the end of the book that should end, but they start introducing all these new elements that, you know, they're not going to get into. They're going to save it for a future book. It's really distracting and a little amateurish, I felt, because, you know, just end the story already. And they're like, no way, we need to introduce all this other cool stuff that we're not going to get into. And I felt that was a little bit cheap, not cheap, amateurish, you know, because, you know, the story's over, finish it, don't keep going. So overall, the Sword of Kaigen was a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting to be invested as much as I was. The action's very taut. You really get to explore the mindset of this, you know, character and her inner turmoils, and then of course her young son, who also has a lot of turmoil in this sort of society that maybe can't trust anyone else. There's also lots of action. It's really described really well. The magic system is really developed. It's more than just copying Avatar: The Last Airbender, because in Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know, the elements also sort of influence your personality. You know, Aang is a aloof, fun, loving, you know, air, like wind, you know, he's like the wind. And then of course, you know, firebenders are very, you know, fiery, and earthbenders are very stern, you know, things like that. It really doesn't affect the personality in this. Like the powers are sort of an accent to the characters. The characters are very well developed on their own, and they also happen to have powers. And, you know, some of them are very powerful to the point of almost being very godlike. So it's really interesting to see them in battle. So overall, the Sword of Kaigen is a recommendation for me for sure. It's really well done. Not perfect, so I give the Sword of Kaigen by ML Wang a 4.5 out of 5.